Marcus Wellington sat in the back of his black Mercedes S-Class, scrolling through quarterly reports on his tablet. As the CEO of Wellington Tech Industries, a company worth $8 billion, his time was measured in millions per hour. The Seattle skyline glittered behind him as his driver navigated through the downtown traffic. "Take Fifth Avenue," Marcus instructed without looking up. "There's construction on Pine." As the car slowed at a red light near Pike Place Market, something caught his eye. A young man sat on the sidewalk, huddled against the cold November wind, holding a cardboard sign. The figure wore a tattered army jacket that looked far too thin for the weather. Marcus's blood ran cold. Even from this distance, even with a scraggly beard and hollow cheeks, he recognized that face. It was impossible, yet undeniable. "Stop the car," Marcus commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir," his driver Robert glanced back confused. "I said stop the car. Now." The Mercedes pulled over abruptly. Marcus threw open the door and stepped onto the wet pavement, his $5,000 Italian shoes splashing through a puddle. His heart hammered as he approached the young man whose head was bowed, face hidden beneath a worn baseball cap. The cardboard sign read, "Homeless Veteran. Anything helps. God bless." "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice trembling. The young man looked up slowly, and their eyes met. Recognition flickered across the weathered face, followed immediately by something else, shame, anger, pain, all mixed together. "Dylan," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. His son, his 26-year-old son who he hadn't seen in 3 years, stared back at him from the streets of Seattle. "What are you doing here?" Dylan's voice was hoarse, defensive. He started to gather his things, a sleeping bag, a backpack, preparing to run. "Dylan, wait," Marcus reached out but stopped himself. "Please, don't go." "Why? So you can lecture me? Tell me I'm a disappointment again." Dylan's eyes flashed with old wounds. "I'm doing just fine, as you can see." Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. Dylan had lost at least 30 pounds. His once athletic frame was gaunt, his skin pale and weathered. The confident young man who'd left for the army had been replaced by someone who looked decades older. "How long have you been?" Marcus couldn't even finish the sentence. "On the streets?" 6 months. "In Seattle?" 8. Dylan stood up, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. "But don't worry, Dad. I'm not your problem anymore, remember? That's what you said when I enlisted instead of joining your precious company." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He did remember. He remembered their last argument in his office, 3 years ago. Dylan had wanted to serve his country. Marcus had called it throwing away his potential. They both said things they couldn't take back. "I was wrong," Marcus said quietly. "I was so wrong, Dylan. Please, let me help you." "I don't need your help." Dylan started walking away. "You're living on the streets." Dylan whirled around, and for the first time, Marcus saw tears in his son's eyes. "And whose fault is that? When I came back from Afghanistan, when I was struggling, where were you? I called. I emailed. Nothing. You made it clear, I made my choice, now I had to live with it." Marcus felt the weight of every ignored message, every call he'd been too busy to return. I thought you were doing fine. Your mother said, Mom." Dylan laughed bitterly. "Mom died 18 months ago. Dad. But you'd know that if you'd bothered to come to the funeral." The world tilted beneath Marcus's feet. "What? No. Caroline is in Paris. We speak every few weeks. That's your assistant, Dad. Playing the role you paid her to play. Mom didn't want you to know she was sick because she knew you'd just throw money at it and feel like you'd done your duty." Dylan's voice cracked. "She wanted you to show up. Just once, to show up for something other than a board meeting. Marcus grabbed a nearby parking meter to steady himself. Caroline was dead. His ex-wife, the woman he'd spent 15 years married to, the mother of his only child, gone. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Dylan, I swear I didn't know." Robert approached cautiously. "Sir? Is everything all right?" "Give us a moment," Marcus said, not taking his eyes off Dylan. "Please." After the driver retreated, Marcus spoke again. "You said you've been struggling. What happened?" Dylan's shoulders sagged. The fight seemed to drain out of him. "IED in Kandahar. Lost 3 guys from my unit. I got blown back but survived with a TBI, traumatic brain injury. The VA prescribed medication, but nothing helped. The nightmares. The flashbacks. I couldn't hold down a job. The noise, the crowds. Everything set me off. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the last thing you said to me was that I'd made my bed and now I had to lie in it." Dylan's voice echoed off the buildings. "Because you always taught me that Wellingtons don't ask for help, they give it. That we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. So that's what I tried to do." Marcus felt each word like a knife. He had said those things. He'd built his empire on that philosophy. "I'm sorry," he said, and was shocked to feel tears on his own cheeks. "I'm so sorry." Dylan stared at him, surprised. Marcus Wellington didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He didn't show weakness. "Come home with me," Marcus said. "Please. Let me help you. Let me be your father." "I don't fit in your world anymore, Dad." Dylan gestured at himself. "Look at me. I'm broken." "No." Marcus stepped closer. "You're hurt. You served our country. You sacrificed. And I failed you. Let me make this right. It won't fix everything, but, please, let me try." For a long moment, Dylan said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. The ride to Marcus's penthouse was silent. Dylan stared out the window while Marcus made quiet phone calls, canceling meetings, rearranging his schedule. For the first time in 30 years, Wellington Tech Industries would function without him for a few days. The penthouse overlooked Elliott Bay, all glass and steel and modern luxury. Dylan walked in like he was entering a museum, afraid to touch anything. "Take a shower," Marcus said gently. "I'll order food. What would you like?" "I don't care." Dylan's voice was flat, distant. Marcus recognized the look. His son was shutting down, overwhelmed. "Pizza. You always loved pizza." Marcus pulled out his phone. "Extra pepperoni, right?" The smallest smile ghosted across Dylan's face. "Yeah." While Dylan showered, Marcus sat on his couch and finally let himself fall apart. He called his assistant, Jennifer, and learned the truth. Yes, she'd been posing as Caroline in occasional brief calls. Yes, she'd kept Dylan's messages from reaching him, because Marcus had explicitly told her to, 3 years ago, in a fit of anger after their argument. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Wellington," Jennifer said, crying. "I should have told you when Ms. Wellington passed." "I should have—" "No," Marcus interrupted. "This is on me. All of it." He'd built an empire but lost his family. He'd accumulated billions but couldn't make a simple phone call to his own son. He thought he was teaching Dylan about strength and independence, but he'd really just been hiding from his own failures as a father. When Dylan emerged an hour later, clean and wearing borrowed clothes that hung loose on his frame, Marcus had food waiting and a plan forming. "I called some people," Marcus said as they ate. "Veterans Counseling Services. PTSD specialists. The best doctors in Seattle. I can't afford, I'm paying. And before you argue, this isn't charity. You're my son. This is what family does." Marcus paused. If you'll let me back into your life, that is. Dylan was quiet for a long time. Why now? Why do you suddenly care? It was a fair question. Marcus thought carefully about his answer. Honestly, seeing you on that street scared me more than anything in my entire life. But it's more than that. When you told me about your mother. He had to stop, compose himself. I've spent 30 years building a company. I told myself I was building a legacy for you. But what's the point of a legacy if I don't have a relationship with the person I'm leaving it to? I've been so focused on success that I forgot what actually matters. The next weeks weren't easy. Dylan struggled. Some days he was hostile, pushing Marcus away. Other days he was distant, unreachable behind walls of trauma. Marcus learned that healing wasn't linear, that love wasn't enough, that being present was harder than writing a check. But Marcus showed up. Every single day he attended Dylan's therapy appointments and sat in the waiting room. He learned about PTSD, about trigger warnings, about survivor's guilt. He learned to give Dylan space when he needed it and to be there when he didn't. He also started asking questions. About Afghanistan. About Dylan's unit. About the friends who didn't make it home. Marcus listened to stories that broke his heart, and he didn't look away. One evening, 6 weeks after finding Dylan on the street, they sat together on the penthouse balcony. Dylan had gained back 15 pounds and was looking healthier, though the shadows still lingered in his eyes. I've been thinking, Marcus said carefully. Wellington Tech has a corporate social responsibility division, but it's mostly tax write-offs and photo ops. I want to change that. Create real programs for veterans, job training, mental health support, housing assistance. Dylan glanced at him. That's good. A lot of guys need that. I want you to run it. Dad, hear me out. Marcus leaned forward. Not now. Not until you're ready. But eventually. You understand what veterans need because you lived it. You know what the system fails at because you fell through the cracks. Who better to build something that actually works? I don't know anything about running a division of a corporation. I'll teach you. We'll hire experts. You won't be alone. Marcus met his son's eyes. And there's no pressure. If you don't want to, that's fine. I just want you to know that there's a place for you, whenever you're ready. Dylan looked out at the city. Lights reflecting off the water. Why are you really doing this? Because I want my son back. Because I want to be the father I should have been. And because those soldiers who didn't make it home, they deserve to be honored. If we can help the ones who did make it home, maybe that's a start. 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of the Wellington Tech Industries Board of Directors. I'm proposing a new division, he said, pulling up a presentation. The Wellington Foundation for Veterans. Initial funding, $500 million. The board members murmured among themselves. Sarah Chun, the CFO, spoke up. That's a significant investment. What's the expected ROI? There isn't one, Marcus said flatly. This isn't about profit. This is about responsibility. We have the resources to make a difference, so we're going to. Marcus, Richard Holbrook, the oldest board member, leaned forward. I've known you for 25 years. You don't make decisions based on sentiment. What's really going on? Marcus took a breath. He'd planned to keep this professional, separate from his personal life. But looking around the table at these people, many of whom he'd worked with for decades, he realized they deserved the truth. 3 months ago, I found my son living on the streets. He's a veteran with PTSD, and I didn't even know he was struggling because I'd cut him out of my life. Marcus's voice remained steady, but his hands gripped the podium. I spent 30 years building this company at the expense of my family. I can't get those years back. But I can make sure other veterans don't fall through the cracks the way my son did. The room was silent. Sarah spoke first. "I'll vote yes. My nephew served in Iraq. He struggled too." "Yes," said Richard. One by one, every board member voted in favor. The day the foundation officially launched, Marcus invited Dylan to the ceremony. Dylan had been working with a consultant, learning about nonprofit management and veteran services, but he still wasn't sure about taking on a leadership role. "I'm not ready, Dad," Dylan had said that morning. "I'm still figuring out my own stuff. How can I help other people?" "You don't have to decide today," Marcus assured him. "Just come to the launch. See what we've built." The event was held at Wellington Tech's headquarters, a gleaming tower in downtown Seattle. Marcus expected maybe 100 people, board members, employees, some press. When he and Dylan arrived, there were at least 500 people in the auditorium. And not the people he expected. The seats were filled with veterans. Young and old, men and women, some in wheelchairs, some with service dogs. They wore unit patches and carried flags. In the front row sat 3 people Marcus didn't recognize, but Dylan did. "Rodriguez? Chen? Oh my God," Dylan's voice broke. These were members of his unit, guys he'd served with in Afghanistan. Marcus watched as Dylan rushed forward, embracing his fellow soldiers. They laughed and cried and spoke in the shorthand of shared experience. After a few minutes, Rodriguez approached Marcus. "Sir," he said, extending his hand. "Sergeant First Class James Rodriguez. Thank you for what you're doing here." "It's the least I can do," Marcus said. "Dylan told me about Afghanistan. About what you all went through." "Dylan saved my life," Rodriguez said simply. "IED hit our convoy. He pulled me out of a burning vehicle while taking fire. Got himself injured in the process, but he wouldn't leave me behind." He glanced at Dylan. "When we heard about the foundation, when we heard Dylan was involved, we had to come." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He'd never heard this story. Dylan had never mentioned saving anyone. He'd only talked about the friends he'd lost. The ceremony began. Marcus gave a speech about the Foundation's mission: housing support, mental health services, job training, family counseling. He announced partnerships with the VA and veterans organizations. He outlined a budget that would help thousands of veterans transition back to civilian life. Then he did something he hadn't planned. "I'd like to introduce someone," Marcus said, deviating from his prepared remarks. "My son, Dylan Wellington, served our country with honor. He came home with invisible wounds, and our system failed him. I failed him." His voice echoed through the auditorium. "But he never gave up fighting. And now, if he's willing, I hope he'll fight for others the way he fought for his unit overseas." Marcus looked at Dylan. "Son, will you lead this foundation?" The room erupted in applause. Dylan stood frozen, shocked. He looked at the veterans around him, at his father on stage, at the opportunity being offered. Slowly, Dylan walked to the podium. Marcus stepped aside, giving him space. I don't know what to say," Dylan began. 3 months ago, I was homeless. I'd given up. I thought my life was over." He paused, collecting himself. "My dad found me. He could have just written a check and walked away. Instead, he showed up. Every single day, even when I was difficult, even when I pushed him away, he showed up." Dylan looked at Marcus. "You taught me something, Dad. You taught me that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to be better." He turned back to the audience. "So, yes, I'll lead this foundation. Not because I have all the answers, but because I know what it's like to fall through the cracks. And with help, with support, I know what it's like to climb back out." The applause was deafening. 6 months later, the Wellington Foundation had helped over 200 veterans find housing and employment. Dylan had thrown himself into the work with the same dedication he'd shown in the Army. He still had bad days, but he had purpose again. Marcus had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Wellington Tech, promoting Sarah Chun to co-CEO while he focused on the foundation and, more importantly, on being present in Dylan's life. One Saturday morning, Dylan arrived at the penthouse with coffee and bagels, their new weekend tradition. "I need to tell you something," Dylan said as they sat on the balcony. Marcus's chest tightened with worry. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's just—" Dylan took a breath. "You remember Rodriguez? From the launch?" "Of course." "Well, we've been talking a lot. Working on foundation stuff together." Dylan smiled, almost shy. "Turns out he's been living in Seattle for 2 years. We've been getting coffee, hanging out. He's helping me process a lot of the Afghanistan stuff." "That's great, son." "Yeah. And the thing is—" Dylan paused. "He told me something. About Mom." Marcus set down his coffee. "What about her?" "Before she died, Rodriguez says she called him. She tracked down several guys from my unit. She told them where I was, what was happening with me." Dylan's voice was thick with emotion. "She asked them to look out for me. Rodriguez had been checking on me, from a distance, for months, making sure I was safe. He was the one who suggested I stay near Pike Place. Said it was safer, more people around." "I don't understand," Marcus said. "Mom knew you'd eventually come looking for me. She knew that sooner or later, you'd drive past Pike Place. It's on your route to the office." Dylan pulled out a worn envelope. "Rodriguez gave me this. Mom left it with him, told him to give it to me when the time was right." With shaking hands, Marcus watched as Dylan opened the letter. Inside was a note in Caroline's handwriting. "My dearest Dylan, if you're reading this, your father has found you. I know this because I know Marcus. He's stubborn and prideful, but underneath all that armor, he loves you more than anything in this world. He just forgot how to show it. I arranged things this way. I know it seems cruel. But your father needed to see with his own eyes what his choices had cost. He needed to be shocked out of his comfortable life. You needed to see if he would choose his pride or his son. I'm sorry I won't be there to see you both find your way back to each other. But I believe you will. You're both Wellington men, stubborn as hell, but loyal to the core once you remember what matters. Dylan, let him in. He'll stumble and mess up, but give him a chance. Marcus." If you're reading this over Dylan's shoulder, and I know you are, stop building walls and start building bridges. The empire means nothing if you're alone at the top. Dylan, let him in. He'll stumble and mess up, but give him a chance. Marcus, if you're reading this over Dylan's shoulder, and I know you are, stop building walls and start building bridges. The empire means nothing if you're alone at the top. Love always. Caroline. Marcus couldn't speak. Caroline had orchestrated everything, the location, the timing, even the assistant posing as her so he wouldn't know she was sick. She'd set up the pieces knowing that only a shock profound enough would break through his defenses. "She knew me too well," Marcus finally whispered. "She knew both of us," Dylan said. "She knew I was too proud to come crawling back, and she knew you were too stubborn to reach out unless you had no choice. She must have been so angry with me." "No." Dylan shook his head. "Rodriguez said she wasn't angry. She was sad, but she also said she believed in second chances. She said you'd given her a second chance once, after she'd made mistakes. She wanted to give you the same." Marcus remembered. 15 years into their marriage, Caroline had struggled with depression. He'd nearly walked away, viewing it as weakness. But she'd asked him to stay, to help her fight. And he had. Those had been some of their best years together, after she recovered. "I miss her," Marcus said. "Me too." They sat in silence, mourning the woman who'd loved them both enough to manipulate them into saving each other. 1 year after finding Dylan on the streets, Marcus stood in the same spot where his Mercedes had stopped that November day. But now, instead of a desperate young veteran sitting alone, there were 20 volunteers setting up tables and tents. The Wellington Foundation was hosting its first annual No Veteran Left Behind outreach event. They were offering free health screenings, mental health resources, job counseling, and hot meals to any veteran who needed help. Dylan directed the setup with military precision, coordinating volunteers like a seasoned commander. Rodriguez worked beside him, along with a dozen other veterans who'd found purpose through the foundation. Mr. Wellington. A young woman approached, Lisa, one of the foundation's first success stories. We're ready to start serving. Marcus watched as veterans began arriving. Some came with families, others alone. They received not just services but respect, dignity, community. The foundation had helped over 1,000 veterans in its first year, with plans to expand to 3 more cities. "Dad," Dylan called out, waving him over. "Come meet someone." Marcus walked over to find Dylan standing with an older man in a weathered army jacket, probably in his 60s. "This is Tom," Dylan introduced them. "He's a Vietnam vet. Tom, this is my father, Marcus Wellington." Tom shook Marcus's hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Your son tells me you're the reason all this exists." "My son is the reason," Marcus corrected. "I'm just funding it." "Nah," Tom said, smiling. "Takes both. Money without heart is just a tax write-off. Heart without money is just good intentions. You got both working together. That's when real change happens." As Tom moved on to get his meal, Dylan stood beside his father, watching the crowd. "Mom would be proud," Dylan said quietly. "She would be proud of you," Marcus replied. "You're helping so many people." "We're helping people," Dylan corrected. "You and me. Together." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. "I should have been there for you from the beginning. You're here now. That's what matters." Dylan paused. "I've been thinking about something Mom wrote in that letter. About building bridges instead of walls." "Yeah. I want to start a program for families. Not just veterans, but their parents, spouses, kids. Help them understand PTSD, give them tools to support their veterans." Dylan looked at his father. "Because you've learned a lot this year too. Maybe there are other fathers out there who need someone to show them how to show up." Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded. "Oh, and one more thing," Dylan added, trying to sound casual. "Rodriguez and I were talking. We want to expand the foundation's housing program. But we'd need someone with real estate experience to oversee the property acquisitions. Someone who knows business but also understands what we're trying to do. Did you have someone in mind?" Dylan smiled. "Actually, yeah. There's this CEO I know. Used to be all about profit margins and quarterly reports. But lately, he's been learning that some investments can't be measured in dollars." He paused. "Think he'd be interested in joining the team full-time?" Marcus stared at his son. "You're asking me to leave Wellington Tech. I'm asking you what you want, Dad. Really want. Not what you think you should do, not what's expected of a Marcus Wellington. What do you actually want?" It was the question Marcus had been avoiding his whole life. But now, standing on this street corner where he'd found his son, watching veterans receive the help they deserved, he knew the answer. "I want to build something that matters," Marcus said. "I want to work with my son. I want to make sure no veteran ends up on these streets the way you did." "So is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Dylan grinned and pulled his father into a hug. Marcus held on tight. This man who'd once been his little boy, who'd grown into someone far stronger and more compassionate than Marcus had ever been.